So what I'm going to do is shift gears a little bit. I'm going to do a bit of a product pitch, and specifically, I'm going to walk through SAP Analytics Cloud. And just by way of background, so I run a team called our Center of Excellence around analytics. So by way of background, I'm a huge data geek, so I've been in the analytics space for about 20 years. And so a lot of the topics that we talked about, I'm going to kind of show that in practice. I'll show a few slides. I'll go through this in warp speed. And then more specifically, I want to show some demos to really kind of reinforce what we're talking about here. And so I like to kind of start this with a story, and this dovetails into some of the presentations we saw earlier. So about 20 years ago, in 2000, I moved to Northern Virginia. I came from Canada, moved to Northern Virginia, knew nothing about the area, didn't know how to get around anywhere. And so back then, you guys probably all knew we used maps. So I got this big road atlas, and I was kind of navigating how do I get to my crappy kind of apartment in McLean to like Tyson's Corner, how do I get to the grocery store, and all these different spots. Now, as you all know with maps, these are good because you know exactly where to go, you can navigate pretty easily, but you have to figure out and spend a lot of hours planning every single route. You don't know how to get places, so you're drawing lines of what you think is the quickest way, what might not actually be the quickest way. So I spent hours figuring out how to get to the grocery store, how to get to this restaurant, how to get to this office, how to get to these customers. And what I did is I assumed everywhere just took 45 minutes. And it may have taken 45 minutes to get to the office. Sometimes, like I played men's league hockey in Reston, that would take sometimes 10 minutes because it was like 11 o'clock at night we had to play. Or sometimes I was going somewhere to a customer meeting and it would take an hour and a half. So I had very little information. It was very manual to do this. Then this great little tool came along called MapQuest. And what this did is it took the hours of work that I needed to do on the map and allowed me to put a start address and an end address, and this planned my route for me. Self-service, didn't need IT, super easy to do. But what it didn't do, the biggest thing I needed to do here is I needed to know my start address and my end address. And it planned the best route for me, but I had to know that question well in advance. So typical thing is, what if you had to stop for gas? What if you wanted to eat? What if you wanted to do this? What if you took a wrong turn? This never got me back to where I needed to go. And so you fast forward to where we are now with things like Google Maps and Waze, it's completely real time. So I don't have to say everything's going to take 45 minutes. I actually know exactly how long it's going to take. I could take a wrong turn, I could take a left turn, and it's going to course correct me. Or I can say I want to stop and get gas, or I want to stop and get something to eat, and it's going to tell me exactly what's close. And the reason why I say this is very similar to what I'm seeing in the analytics space from when I started in 2000 to where we are now. And kind of follow along this analogy, it might break down a little bit, but in the bottom left-hand corner is where I think we were in 2000. We had reporting solutions. You had spent a lot of time building semantic layers, building reports to give to the business. In 2010, these visualization data discovery vendors came out, and it was really like I kind of called it a map quest. You had to know the questions you want to answer ahead of time, but it was easy to do. But again, you had to know the start address and the end address. Where we are now, and this is where we're putting a huge investment around, is around augmented analytics. I don't know where I want to go. I might want to course correct. I want real time. I want to change. And I want the machine, if you will, to help guide me towards what I want to do. And just to give you one additional story, so yesterday I was with a large kind of Greek yogurt manufacturer. And one of the things they were asking about is, we don't need all this ML. Like, I think we're good with self-service. And we're good with kind of data discovery solutions out there. And I guess our kind of pitch to them is, you think you're good. But the biggest thing when you create these new visualizations is it's completely subject to bias. It assumes that you know what you're kind of doing, and you make a lot of assumptions around the data and the report that you're trying to do. It's still time consuming. So back to the MapQuest example, I'm asking tons of questions and creating tons of visualizations ahead of time, and it's super unclear kind of what my next steps are. Okay, this expense is going up. This is some risk, but what am I doing around it? And there's very, very little that's guiding me towards this. So at SAP, we're thinking of rethinking the whole world of analytics. And in yellow, you could argue is kind of the MapQuest and the maps of the world. And blue is really kind of the Google Maps and Waze, which we're still delivering those capabilities around visualization, data discovery, Agile BI, and so forth. But then we're augmenting this with machine learning, natural language processing, artificial intelligence, predictive analytics to really help with that. As another story, I was listening to a podcast with Elon Musk, and I don't know if you follow him too closely, but he has this AI company he's starting, and he's been lobbying the government about ethical responsibilities for AI. But one of the things, and it's super creepy, it's like Black Mirror stuff, where you have a company where you're actually going to put a little thing on the side of your head, and it's basically like an Alexa, but it's actually grabbing what you're thinking and giving you information back to you. And believe it or not, they're actually really close to this. If you Google search it, it's actually pretty interesting. So it's kind of the same concept where within your data, you might have some pre-canned questions, but every time you have new questions in this stuff, we want to have this machine kind of fuel those new questions that people have, because those questions are going to constantly change. All right. So last slide I'll show, then I'll show you some cool stuff. So the product pitch here is SAP Analytics Cloud. So this product is a complete software as a service application. So it runs up in the cloud, so there's no software, there's no desktops, there's no hardware to maintain. It provides all analytics from data, BI, predictive, and planning, all wrapped together in a unified cloud experience. It allows you to connect in a hybrid world from your on-premise data, SAP, non-SAP data, all together without having to replicate the data every time, so you're not going rogue. And then what's pretty neat about this is this analytics tool, in addition to being standalone, this is fueling a lot of innovations around the intelligent enterprise. So we're baking this into all of our SAP applications as an embedded experience within those. So let me just show you a quick demonstration. So I'll spend the rest of the time showing a demonstration. So one of the great things about the federal government is they provide a ton of data. So I'm a data geek, and I'm constantly looking at data. So the federal government and state and local governments, a lot of data around opioids, 911 calls. But one of my favorite data sets is the Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau. So as you guys all know, these are guys that are a key watchdog that help like the everyday consumer from these big bad bullying companies from like frauding them and stealing the money. So the coolest thing about this is they provide all the data that's available for you to download. And a couple of outcomes they had from this is the big, Equifax with that breach that led to a lawsuit that had $31 million in damages that they repay. Another one was with Experian, with how they didn't allow students to repay their loans and stuff like that. That led to this, specifically from this thing. So what they provide here is they provide access to all this data that anyone could download. And so what I did, and I'll just show you a quick video on this, I downloaded all this data, put it into HANA, and then I wanted to run some analytics and see what the proverbial machine would tell me. So I'll show this video just because I didn't know what my internet connection was going to be, and that I did last night. So this is SAP Analytics Cloud. So as mentioned, this is software as a service, BI, predictive and planning, unified cloud experience, and it connects live to your data without replicating it. So this is kind of the default screen. This could all be branded and customized. If you want to create a new dashboard or story, very simple, no desktop, I can create a new story right on this screen. The first thing it's going to ask me to do is it's going to say, I need some data. Give me some data that can start to analyze. There's a really simple button, and this is where it's going to say, what kind of data do you want? Do you want to access a database? Do you want to access some flat files? Do you want data stored in other reports? But probably the best thing is you could connect to some governed models. So let me quickly pause here and just reinforce this. So a lot of times what I see in the space is people are constantly going rogue every single time. Every time, back to that MapQuest example, they have a new question, they're going rogue, here's a spreadsheet, here's a flat file, and they're doing this stuff over and over and over again. What's extremely misleading about these things is when you look it over the web, you just assume it's true. But when you look at it in a spreadsheet, you assume that somebody changed the number, it's bound to be wrong. But when you look at the web, you assume it's the truth. So what's cool about this is I can connect to some governed models. So one of the ones I used here is all the consumer complaints. So this is the whole database that's loaded to HANA from the Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau. When you first load this, you're just going to see a profile of what the data looks like. So I can see my only measure here is my number of complaints that I did. And then I can see all the, for lack of better words, the dimensions or the attributes that's coming from that data set. So if you want to see all the complaints that were logged of all time, right now there's 1.3 million complaints. I could actually go in the notes and you can see all the F-bombs and stuff like that people wrote in those actual notes. And then I could actually look at it by when are those complaints coming, so I can see a trend chart really quickly and see those complaints over time. From the very first time, December 2011, when this first opened, all the way to this month, I can see every single complaint that was logged on a monthly basis. And if I wanted to, I could really easily add this to my dashboard. So in about 2 or 3 clicks, I created a very simple visual that went from having, let me quickly pause here, that went from grabbing some data, looking at all the complaints, and creating a very simple visual. So nothing hard to do. This is something that anyone could start to do. But I don't think I was really flexing any kind of crazy analytical muscles by doing this. So let me show you a couple of neat things directly within this line chart. If I wanted to forecast this in the future, this is a simple checkbox where now I could look at the trend, but now I can see the trend is actually increasing. And by 2021, we think there'll be close to 30 million records that are created here. So very, very easy, 30,000 per month records they're going to have on here. So very simple, some of the things you could start to do within here. Now, so first demo, just to show you if I have a very simple question, how I can ask and answer it. Again, don't think I'm flexing a lot of crazy muscles around this. Now, one of the neat things around this is I could leverage search. So one of the things that Google has taught us, if you have a question, why don't you search for it? So directly within this data set, it's very hard to see on the bottom, but I could search. So I could say show complaints, and directly here, it's going to give me that same number you saw before, the 1.3 million complaints that I had here. If I want to say show complaints by year, I can see that same trend chart around all the complaints that people are logging by year. So again, nothing here is hard to do. I could just easily ask and answer these questions. I could keep doing more and more searches. So now I'm doing show my complaints by company. As I'm doing this, I'm seeing all the companies here. Equifax, Experian are the top ones. And I can see all the detailed ones underneath. As you can start seeing, a lot of them are financial institutions are the ones that are getting the most complaints here. But these things get very, very clever. And it's hard to see here at the bottom. But now I'm saying, just show me the top 10. So nose gestures. Now I can say, show me the top 10 for 2019 or for this month. What's the top 10 for this month compared to last month? And if you guys are Google Power users, it's similar to this. You could do some really, really advanced searches. So what you're seeing here, now I could say, show the top 10 by company, show it by issue I'm having, and I could add these different things to my dashboard just by copying them. And I'll just show a couple more things. Now I can show my, what's the issue, what's the company. I could also say, what's the product people are having issues with. And in this product, and again, it's hard to see because I'm searching at the bottom, but you could put typos into here. You don't actually have to know the exact words you're searching for. You could just do natural language search, and it's going to do its best guess to understand what it is you're searching for. So all my string of different searches are stored directly within here, and I basically asked about 10 different questions directly on the screen. And now what you're seeing is, in addition to my trend chart, I see all those new things I did, my top 10 by company, top 10 by product, top 10 by the actual issue somebody's having. So you can see here, if I'm looking at the time scale, just about 5 minutes I did this in. And now what's cool is this whole thing is interactive. So there's actually a spike at 27,000. If I look at that spike in September, I can see it directly came from Equifax. And that's when the breach came out. So this is the kind of discovery I can do. If I want to know in general, show me all the breaches around Equifax. This is where you can see a huge spike of almost 10,000 complaints that came in just that month alone. And I can see it's related to credit reporting, incorrect information on the report, how they use my personal information. So I can see exactly what the issue is leading to that. Now, if I translate to something like Wells Fargo, now I'm going to see something very different. You actually don't see the Wells Fargo, that same spike when they open up all the incorrect bank accounts. But I can start seeing there's stuff around checking and savings accounts, how they open and close accounts. Those are some of the top issues around here. So let me just quickly pause here for a second. So hopefully you saw here, nothing here is rocket scientist. Like anyone could do this. It's super easy and intuitive to use. But here's where I'll show you some of the really innovative stuff that we're doing around machine learning. So instead of having to drill down and select on any one of these things, what I can do is I could select any one of these points that I can see here. I think I'm a little bit further. But what I could do is leverage what we call smart insights. So I could see all the relationships. So instead of drilling up and drilling down every single time in a hierarchy, what I can do here is click on Equifax. There's a little light bulb that's going to appear on the side here. Again, I recorded this morning. There's a little light bulb. What this is going to do is it's going to show me all the associations that's driving that number. So why does Equifax have that 130,000 complaints? It's around credit reporting, credit services. A lot of those were closed with an explanation, so no monetary benefit they gave. People submitted this over the web. Equifax did do a timely response to people, and then people didn't dispute the response they got back from Equifax, which is actually kind of interesting. Now, what I could also do here is I can compare this to something different, like Wells Fargo. And if I leverage that same smart insights, I'm going to see some very, very different associations and relationships within that number. So in here, I'm going to see mortgage as a top product. They close this with explanation, web, timely response, but I could also see very different things where consumers potentially did more likely they disputed this than other people. And then, for example, I could start doing more and more analysis off this. Well, who's disputing it, and things like that. So this is, instead of having to understand the questions, you could let the data drive you in a very, very specific way around what you're trying to do. All right, last thing I'll show here, and this is probably the coolest feature, is a lot of times I work with a lot of companies that acquire a lot of data, they purchase a lot of data, or they have a lot of data they know nothing about. And the biggest thing they ask about is just tell me what's interesting about it. Like, what should I focus on? And so this is probably the neatest feature around it. So I'm going to go against the same data set here. And we have a feature here called Smart Discovery. And what this is going to do is it's going to build an analytical asset or analytical application for you from scratch. All it needs to know is what you want to look at, the data set, which we provided. It's going to want to know what you want to analyze, which is I want to look at complaints. And then I could choose to exclude a lot of other factors. And the proverbial machine is going to generate something for me. So the hamster is running around the wheel here, kind of creating a dashboard. And it's going to create 4 artifacts for me. It's going to create a dashboard view. It's going to create 2 predictive views. And it's going to create a planning kind of what-if view I can do off of that data set. So it's slowly going here. If I was recording this, I would have kind of sped this forward a bit. And when it gets created, I'll just skip this along. So here's where I could see all of the different kind of things it's doing. So I can see my total complaints. I can see that trend over time with that spike for Equifax as an example. I can see views around who, and with the predictive forecast, how that's going over time. I can see if people are disputing those claims or are they not. I can see what kind of timely responses are people are getting, how they're submitting them. And I could also see some narratives, some natural language generation underneath, just highlighting the biggest outliers within that data set. So super cool kind of stuff. The next view is this is going to tell me the key influencers. When I look at the top complaints, in the top left-hand corner, what's driving those complaints in ranked order? So I can see here the sub-issue, the potential issue is what people are having complaints, the state that people are filing from, our complaints, the company, the issue, how people are responding. So in ranked order, I could see predictively what are the attributes I should start to focus on. So I can see here how people submit it and things like that. The product is not a big issue, but the actual issue itself. And underneath here, most times the issues are how they're actually using your credit and how they're using your information on the reports that they're generating. That's the biggest issue that I'm starting to focus on. Again, that's where machine learning really helps out to where I should focus on. And then, for example, you can see here the biggest states, Florida, Texas, California, and Georgia. Those are the biggest ones that are contributing to that number. And all the other states are much, much smaller beyond that. And then a few different tabs here. With this data set, it's not going to yield a lot of insight around this. But this is what's going to do a chai test for you guys to know statistics, where it's going to say, what's the actual value I have in the data set, and what are we predicting? So I see the total number of complaints, and here's the complaints that we're expecting. So this is where you could find the needle in a haystack. For example, these sub-issues for Florida, for Equifax, for this issue that were closed without explanation, we got this number of complaints, we expected a lot less. So again, you could really, really focus on key issues. And lastly, this simulation view is not the greatest one for this data set, but this is where you can start doing some what-ifing. What if complaints go up? What's the response time look like? What if the number of timely response go down? And you can start to play around with that number and see directly what the impact is going to be on those data sets itself. So quick kind of little whirlwind tour around SAP Analytics Cloud, just to kind of reinforce a couple of different things here. Software as a service application, BI, predictive, and planning capabilities all in a cloud interface. It provides live connectivity to this data, and this is a huge thing that we're using to embed within all our SP applications. So hopefully that kind of came clear around it. How am I in time? 2 minutes, all right. So one thing I will show just to kind of in closing around this, so what you saw, what I did in the demos, I built all this stuff from scratch, but we have a ton of pre-built content. So we have over 70 of these across different industries and lines of businesses that you could use as a jump start. So these include the data model, the look and feel, the story, the dashboards, and all the different views that you could leverage. And a lot of times in POCs, we will start using those as a jump start for customers. So whether you're looking at accounts receivables, accounts payable, complaints, service times and things like that, these are all templates that you could start to use to kind of get you on a jump start around analytics. So I didn't have a lot of time. Do you want to kind of close with some of the?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important questions we always get when it comes to cloud is Fedramp certification. So I'm pleased to announce that we are in the final stages of our Fedramp certification, and we expect the announcement of this certification to occur in the next 90 days. So it's been about, if you know anything about this process, it's about been a year and a half in the making to go through that process. So look for an announcement coming out in the next 90 days that this product will be available to the federal government in a Fedramp certified environment.
Right.
And with that, we'll take any questions.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to read from here, but does it go into the fraud detection, waste, and abuse?
Sorry, what was the question?
Fraud detection, waste, and abuse.
Oh, some of the ones? So these are just a sample of them, but we have a ton more. So there's about 70 of them, and they're all well documented what KPIs and measures and what the data sources we use are. So around fraud detection, I'm not sure. We'd have to look into that.
There it is. Does the platform give any indicator of data quality when it inputs it?
Yep, so a couple things, like one of the Achilles heel of all these things is data. So you have bad data, this is going to provide it. As you start to bring in data, we profile the data and start to tell you things. So I didn't show it there, but in the modeling environment, you could click on different dimensions. It'll tell you the distribution of things, of where things are. So if you have negative numbers or incorrect numbers, it will point that out, but you do have to kind of click on it and things like that. So it helps that, but doesn't fix it. All right.
All right. Thank you very much,
Yep, no
Jason.
problem. Thank you.